That evening, the table was full. My son Mark's friends, a few neighbors, and of course, Lydia, my daughter-in-law, sitting at the head as if she owned the house. She'd planned the dinner herself. Candles, music, everything perfect. I'd cooked the roast. I always did. I remember standing near the table, smiling quietly while everyone talked. The room was glowing. Warm lights, the smell of food, the sound of laughter. For a moment, I thought maybe this peace will last. But it didn't. Out of nowhere, Lydia's voice cut through the laughter. Sharp, loud. "Mark?" she said, her smile tight. "When is your mother finally going to start paying rent? I mean, she's been living here for free for years." The laughter stopped. You could have heard a pin drop. She wasn't done. She leaned back in her chair, eyes glinting. "Actually," she said, turning straight toward me, "you either start paying rent, or you get out of our house." For a second, no one moved. Mark didn't look up. He just sat there, eyes fixed on his plate like a child caught in the middle of something ugly. The sound of forks being set down echoed louder than her words. And me, I just stood there, frozen. Not because I was shocked, but because in that one instant, I finally saw the truth I'd been avoiding for years. I built this house brick by brick with my husband. Every nail, every wall, our sweat, our dreams. And now she calls it hers. I felt my chest tighten, not from anger, but something heavier, disappointment. Not in Lydia. In Mark, because his silence hurt more than her insult ever could. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. So I smiled. A calm, steady smile that no one understood. Then, slowly, I folded my napkin, set it beside my plate, and stood up. "Excuse me," I said softly. No one tried to stop me. Not even my son. I walked past them. Past the laughter that had turned to whispers, past Lydia's smirk. Past the people who didn't know where to look. When I reached the doorway, I paused for just a second. And in my head, I thought, they think I'm walking away because I'm embarrassed. But I'm not embarrassed. I'm done being kind. And that was the night everything changed. The night they laughed at the woman who owned the walls around them, without realizing it. If you're still watching, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Don't forget to like, comment, and share this story. And subscribe for the next chapter. Because this dinner was just the beginning. I wasn't always this quiet woman sitting at someone else's dinner table. Once, I had my own. A house full of warmth, laughter, and the smell of freshly baked bread. My husband, Robert, and I built that home from nothing. He worked double shifts at the factory. I sewed clothes for neighbors, sold homemade jam at local fairs. We counted every coin, every dollar, saving for our dream house. And when we finally bought it, it wasn't much. Old floors, leaky pipes, a broken porch. But it was ours. Robert painted every wall himself. I planted roses by the fence, red ones for love, white for peace. We used to sit on the porch in the evenings, hands intertwined, talking about the future. I still remember the day he smiled and said, "Helen, even when I'm gone, this house will keep you safe." But after he passed, it didn't feel like safety anymore. It felt like silence. The kind that fills every room until you can't breathe. For months, I lived alone in that big, empty house. Then one day, Mark called. His voice sounded gentle, loving, the way sons do when they want something. "Mom, Lydia and I are struggling a bit. Just for a while, can we stay with you?" Of course, I said yes. That's what mothers do. They make space. I thought it would be temporary, maybe a few months. I cooked, I cleaned, I watched the grandkids so they could work. But months turned to years, and slowly the house stopped feeling like mine. Lydia started with small things. "Oh, Helen, the curtains are too old-fashioned. Let's get new ones." Then it was, "These walls look dull. I'll call someone to repaint." Before I knew it, the wallpaper Robert had picked was gone, replaced with something she saw on Pinterest. Next came the locks. "Security reasons," she said, waving new keys in her hand. I never asked for a copy. I didn't want to start a fight. She began paying bills. "To make things easier," she claimed. And somehow my name started disappearing, one paper at a time. Still, I kept helping. I ironed their clothes, made school lunches, kept the house spotless. They'd thank me sometimes, but not for long. Soon, it was expected. Like my love was part of the furniture. One evening, as I tucked my grandson into bed, I overheard Lydia on the phone. Her voice was sharp, annoyed. "She doesn't pay for anything, Mark. She should be grateful we let her stay." Grateful. That word burned like acid. I thought I'd found peace in family. But peace built on disrespect doesn't last. After that night, something inside me shifted. I started noticing every small insult, every dismissive glance. Whenever guests came, Lydia would say, "Oh, that's just Helen. She helps around the house." Helps. As if I was hired staff. Mark never spoke up. He'd just say, "Mom, she doesn't mean it. Don't take it to heart." But I did, every word, every silence. Then one day, Lydia walked into the kitchen holding a few papers. She smiled, too sweetly. "Helen, can you just sign these real quick? It's for house insurance, nothing big." I didn't read them. I trusted them. That's what mothers do. They trust their children. But now, when I look back, I realize it wasn't about insurance. It was about control. When they made me sign those papers I didn't read, I thought it was for protection. I didn't know it was about power. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who call you Mom. If you've ever trusted the wrong people, you'll understand what comes next. Days turned into weeks, and I began noticing things I used to ignore. It wasn't just what Lydia said anymore. It was how she said it. Her words had a new sharpness, a sting that came wrapped in fake politeness. "Don't touch that. Helen?" she'd say when I reached for a dish. Then, with a laugh that wasn't really a laugh, she'd add, "It's mine now. I like to keep things organized." She'd snatch the laundry from my hands, rearrange the pantry after I cleaned it, even correct me in front of guests. And every time, Mark would jump in, not to defend me, but to defend her. "Mom, please. She's just stressed from work. You know Lydia doesn't mean it that way." Maybe she didn't mean it that way, but the way she looked at me said enough. That cold, tired look people give when they wish you'd just disappear. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Families argue. People say hurtful things when they're tired. But deep down, I knew better. There was one afternoon I'll never forget. I'd spent hours cleaning the living room before their friends arrived. Lydia walked in, took one long look around, and sighed. Once she's gone, she whispered to her friend, loud enough for me to hear, "I'll finally make this house look decent." I froze behind the doorway. My hands still smelled of lemon polish. She said it like I was clutter, something that needed to be removed. For a long time, I stood there, staring at the photos on the wall. Me, Robert, and little Mark, smiling, happy, proud. The same walls Lydia now wanted to make decent. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt strange, foreign. Even the ticking clock seemed to echo, like the house itself was restless. That's when I opened the old chest at the foot of my bed. Inside, wrapped in fading cloth, were pieces of my past Robert's letters. Our wedding photo, and the deed. The original house deed. It was still in my name. The papers Lydia had made me sign years ago. Apparently, she never filed them properly. She thought she was clever. But carelessness, like cruelty, always leaves fingerprints. I sat there for hours, holding that document in my hands, tracing my name with my finger. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something powerful. Not anger, not even revenge, just clarity. They thought I was old and confused, but I wasn't confused. I was patient. The next morning, Lydia was in the kitchen, on her phone, laughing. She didn't even look at me when I walked in. Maybe that was for the best. Because if she had, she would have seen it. That quiet shift in my eyes. The moment a woman stops being afraid. I waited until she left for work, then went to my room, pulled out my old address book, and found the number I hadn't dialed in 15 years. Mr. Collins. Robert's lawyer. The man who helped us buy this house in the first place. My hands shook a little as I picked up the phone. It rang twice before a warm, familiar voice answered. Collins and Associates, this is Richard speaking. Hello, Richard, I said softly. It's Helen Ward. I believe you helped my husband with our property a long time ago. There was a pause, then recognition in his tone. Mrs. Ward! Of course. How can I help you? I took a deep breath and looked around the room that no longer felt like mine. I think it's time, I said quietly, to make a few changes. And that call was the first step toward everything that came next. Have you ever stayed silent just to keep the peace? Sometimes silence doesn't mean weakness. It means planning. If you felt Helen's pain, like, share and subscribe because soon she'll stop being silent. The morning after that phone call, I sat across from Mr. Collins in his small, book-filled office. He hadn't changed much in 15 years. A little grayer, a little slower, but his eyes still kind. He poured me a cup of tea and smiled softly. Helen, I was surprised to hear from you after all this time. What's going on? I hesitated for a moment. Then I told him everything. Lydia's words, her threats, the papers she made me sign. He listened quietly, not interrupting once. When I finally stopped, he adjusted his glasses and opened a folder from his cabinet. You're lucky you came to me, he said gently. Lydia never completed the title transfer. The property is still legally yours. Every single brick, every wall, still in your name. I just stared at him. For a second, I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. So after all these years, I whispered, she's been living in my houses calling it hers. Mr. Collins nodded. Yes, and if you want, we can fix that quietly. He leaned back in his chair. You have every legal right to sell this house, and if you want privacy, we'll do it discreetly through a private buyer. No public listings, no attention. The words felt strange on my tongue. Sell the house. It wasn't revenge. It was release. I signed a few documents. My hand steady this time. No hesitation, no guilt. Mr. Collins smiled. I'll handle the rest. You'll hear from me soon. That night? The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the soft snores coming from upstairs. Lydia and Mark had been arguing earlier. Again. About bills, payments, and Lydia's latest shopping spree. I'd heard her shouting from my room. We can't afford this forever, Mark! Your mother doesn't even pay rent. He didn't respond. He rarely did. While they slept, I opened my closet and pulled out an old suitcase. The same one I'd used on my honeymoon. Inside, I folded my clothes neatly. Not everything, just what I needed. A few photos, Robert's watch, and the deed that had started all of this. I stood in the middle of the room for a long time, looking around. Every corner held memories, laughter, birthdays, quiet nights. And yet, it didn't feel like home anymore. Just walls that had forgotten their kindness. I whispered softly, "Robert, I'm finally doing what you'd want me to do, protecting what we built." At dawn, I rolled the suitcase down the hall. The floor creaked softly beneath my steps. I paused at Mark and Lydia's door. Through the half-open crack, I saw them sleeping, peaceful, unaware. I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was calm, because anger keeps you tied to the people who hurt you, and I was finally letting go. I stepped outside, locking the door gently behind me. The air was cold, but it felt clean, like a breath I hadn't taken in years. A cab was waiting at the corner, engine running. As it drove away, I watched the house shrink in the rearview mirror, not with sadness, but with relief. The apartment I rented was small, one bedroom, a narrow kitchen, and a little window that looked out onto a row of maple trees. But when I walked in, the silence didn't hurt. It healed. No arguments, no slammed doors, just peace. The first night there, I made myself tea, sat by the window, and listened to the quiet hum of the city. No one told me what to do. No one reminded me I was a guest. For the first time in years, I could breathe without permission. I looked around at the plain, empty space and smiled. "It's not much," I whispered, "but it's mine." A week later, Mr. Mine, Collins called. "We have a buyer, Helen," he said, voice steady. "An elderly couple, cash deal. They love the house. We can finalize soon." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. It was done. The house that had once been my prison was now my freedom. They told me to pay rent. So I did. To my new landlord, in my own name. Sometimes, walking away isn't losing. It's reclaiming everything they thought you'd forgotten. If you felt Helen's strength in this chapter, don't forget to like, share, and comment what you'd have done in her place. And subscribe for the next part. Because soon, the ones who called it their housa will learn who truly owned it. A week later, the storm finally hit. Lydia was in the kitchen when she heard the sound of a car pulling up. A man in a suit stepped out, holding a thick envelope. He walked up to the porch, rang the bell once, and handed her the letter. "Mrs. Carter, this is for you. Official notice." She frowned, flipping it open, her manicured fingers trembling as she read the first line. "Noti, tieki, pro parwy hasban sol d." The paper slipped from her hands and floated to the floor. For a moment, the house was silent. The kind of silence that comes right before a storm. Then it started. "Marque!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the halls. "Mark, get down here right now." Mark came rushing from upstairs, half-dressed, confused. "What happened? What happened?" Lydia's voice was trembling, almost hysterical. "The house. Our house. It's been sold. Some lawyer says we have 30 days to move out." She thrust the letter at him, her face pale with disbelief. Mark scanned the papers, his mouth tightening. That's impossible. There has to be a mistake. But there wasn't. Not this time. For the next few hours, chaos filled the house. Lydia was on the phone with the lawyer's office, with the county records, with anyone who would listen. Each time, she got the same calm, professional answer. Ma'am, the sale was completely legal. The property transfer has already been finalized. Finally, she called me. I was sitting in my small apartment, sipping tea by the window. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Hello. You sold our house. Lydia's voice was shrill, shaking with panic. You can't do this! This is our home. I let a small silence stretch between us before I spoke. Correction, I said calmly. It was my home. You told me to get out, remember? There was a beat of stunned silence. Then she exploded. You lied to us! You said you were just renting! You tricked us? I protected myself, I replied softly. There's a difference. You had no right? Every right? I interrupted. You made that clear the day you told me to pay rent or leave. Her tone shifted. The rage cracked, and out came the guilt. Helen, please, you know we've built our life here. The kids love this house. We can't just pack up and go. I closed my eyes, picturing her standing there, shaking, desperate, clutching the same walls she once used to trap me. You'll find another place, I said quietly. You're resourceful when it comes to getting what you want. The guilt turned to pleading. You can't do this to family. Think about Mark. Think about your grandchildren. I sighed. Family doesn't throw each other out, Lydia. You taught me that lesson yourself. Then came the final act. Tears. Her voice softened, trembling just enough to sound fragile. I didn't mean what I said that night, Helen. I was angry. You know how I get when I'm stressed. Please, can't we just forget it? Her words were dripping with the same poison, guilt disguised as grace. But I'd swallowed enough of that in my lifetime. I already have, I said gently. Goodbye, Lydia, and I hung up. 2 hours later, Mr. Collins arrived at the house. Lydia was waiting on the porch, red-eyed, her hands clenched at her sides. Mark stood behind her silent, defeated. Mrs. Carter. Mr. Collins greeted her politely. I'm here to deliver the official sale documents. The new owners will take possession in 29 days. You can't just take our home, Lydia shouted, voice cracking. This is a mistake. No mistake, he said calmly, pulling out a folder. The previous owner, Mrs. Helen Carter, had full legal authority to sell the property. The title has been in her name for over 20 years. Lydia froze. What did you say? Her name, he repeated, has always been on the deed. You were tenants, not owners. Her knees gave way, and she sank down onto the porch steps, her hand covering her mouth. The neighbors had gathered quietly across the street, whispering among themselves. The woman who used to boast about her beautiful home now sat on the very steps she'd claimed as hers, powerless. Mark stood motionless beside her, pale and silent. For the first time, he looked at me not as his mother, not even as an old woman, but as someone who had outsmarted them both. That evening, I got another call. Mark's voice this time. Mom, why didn't you tell us? I took a deep breath. Because you stopped listening years ago. He didn't argue, just a quiet exhale. What are we supposed to do now? The same thing I did when you pushed me out, I said softly. Start over. He didn't reply, just hung up. The next day, as I walked past the house on my morning errand, I saw Lydia outside, standing among half-packed boxes. Her face was pale, eyes hollow, the pride finally gone. She looked up and saw me across the street. For a second, our eyes met. No words were exchanged. None were needed. She turned away first. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth spoke louder than I ever could, Some call it revenge. But to me, it was justice, quiet, precise, and overdue. When someone builds walls around you, sometimes the only way to win is to sell the house. If this moment made your heart race or your eyes tear up, comment, and share Helen's story. And don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter. Because when she finally closes that front door for good, what waits on the other side isn't loneliness. It's freedom. By the end of that month, the whispers had already started. Neighbors talked in hushed tones at the grocery store, by the post boxes, in their driveways. Did you hear what happened to Lydia and Mark? Apparently, the house wasn't even theirs. The story spread like wildfire, each version a little more dramatic than the last. Some pitied them, most didn't. Because everyone had seen the way Lydia treated me, they just never said it out loud. Now, they said plenty. Lydia stopped showing her face around the neighborhood. Her friends avoided her calls. Even her own family kept their distance. She'd spent years building her reputation and lost it in a week. Mark called a few times after they moved out. His voice was heavy, tired, full of something between guilt and confusion. "Mom, I didn't know, I swear, I didn't." I believed him. He hadn't known, because he'd never wanted to. I didn't say that, though. I just told him what I truly felt. "Mark, I'll always love you, but sometimes love means stepping back, not stepping in." He was quiet for a long time. Then, in a soft, almost broken voice, he said, "I wish I'd listened sooner." I smiled sadly, even though he couldn't see it. "So do I." Life after that was peaceful. I moved into a smaller place on the edge of town, 1 bedroom, a garden full of wildflowers, and sunlight that poured through the kitchen window every morning. No one shouted. No one judged. And for the first time in years, every sound in the house was mine. I'd wake up, make my tea, and sit on the porch watching the world go by. Not as someone's mother, not as someone's burden, but as me. Revenge doesn't heal, but it clears the air so you can finally breathe. And oh, how good that air felt. It was late one afternoon when I saw a familiar car pull into the driveway. I knew that shape, even before she stepped out. Lydia. She looked different, thinner, pale, the fire in her eyes replaced with something else. Fear, maybe, or regret. She stood at the gate for a while before walking up slowly, her hands trembling. "Helen, can I talk to you?" I nodded and motioned for her to sit on the porch bench. She didn't. She stayed standing, clutching her bag like it was a shield. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she began, voice breaking. "I was angry and selfish, and I lost everything because of it." Tears filled her eyes. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I can't live with what I did." For a moment, I just watched her. The same woman who once ordered me to pay rent or get out, now standing in front of me, broken, begging to be let in. I stood up slowly, walked over, and put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Lydia," I said quietly, "forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about remembering who you are and choosing not to be that person again." She looked at me, confused, then nodded weakly. There was nothing more to say. She left a few minutes later, her shoulders slumped, her steps heavy. As I watched her car drive away, a soft wind rustled through the garden. The flowers swayed gently, alive, untamed, free. I took a deep breath and smiled. I hadn't needed revenge to win. All I'd needed was peace. Sometimes, walking away is louder than shouting. And silence, when it's chosen, is the strongest voice of all. If this part touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for Helen's final chapter, because her story isn't about revenge anymore. It's about rebirth. 6 months passed. The chaos, the gossip, the noise, all of it had faded like an old echo. These days, my mornings began not with arguments or orders, but with sunlight spilling across my little kitchen table and the smell of fresh tea. The house was quiet, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. And in that peace, something inside me began to bloom again. Every Saturday, a few women gathered in my backyard. Widows, retirees, mothers who'd been forgotten by the families they once raised. We called ourselves the Green Circle. We didn't meet for gossip or pity. We met to plant. Every week, we'd get our hands dirty in the soil, talking and laughing as we dug, watered, and shared stories. The kind you can only tell when you know what heartbreak really feels like. One of them, Clara, said something I'll never forget. "Helen," she smiled, "I came here to learn about gardening, but I think I'm learning how to grow myself again." I laughed softly and said, "That's the point. Plants aren't the only things that need light and care to live." In those moments, I realized something powerful. That strength doesn't come from fighting. It comes from knowing when to stop fighting. So many women spend their whole lives waiting to be respected, to be seen, to be loved the way they deserve. But the truth is, sometimes, you have to give those things to yourself first. I used to think age made me powerless, but it made me free. Free from trying to please everyone. Free from waiting for an apology that never comes. Free from confusing silence with weakness. I looked around at the small garden, green shoots rising from the soil. Laughter filling the air. I felt proud. Not because I'd won some fight, but because I'd finally stopped living like I had to prove anything. As the sun began to set one evening, I walked back inside and stood by the window. The light poured through, painting the walls gold. I thought about the house I'd left behind, the one that used to feel like a cage. And then I looked at this new one, smaller, simpler, but full of peace. They took my roof once. Now I live under peace. And that was enough. If Helen's story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and share this video. And subscribe for more stories that remind you it's never too late to reclaim your peace. Sometimes, life teaches us lessons in the quietest ways, not through shouting or anger, but through the strength it takes to walk away and never look back. I hope Helen's story reminded you of something important. That silence isn't weakness, and kindness isn't a flaw. They're both signs of power, the kind that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. If you stayed with me till the end, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I love reading your stories, your thoughts, and knowing how these moments touch your heart. And if you've ever been underestimated, disrespected, or made to feel small, remember this: you don't have to fight to prove your worth. Just stand tall, stay silent, and let time do the talking. Because sometimes silence is the loudest revenge. Thank you for watching with me, for feeling with me, and for being part of this little corner where stories heal hearts. If you enjoyed this one, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Until then, take care of your heart, and as always, see you in the next story with love and respect.